Welcome everyone to Wing's presentation of a collaborative approach to drone traffic management. Thank you all for taking your time to come and join us today in this virtual environment. We're excited to connect even more with operators and users across Australia and some of the other forums we'll talk about later. Before we dive in, I always like to start with a picture of a drone operation, and this one is delivery, because all the work we're doing on drone traffic management is about enabling operations and keeping that kind of operation first mentality. And so we'll talk through how we keep that in kind of our approach and our vision, and how we're excited to see Australia embrace that as well. My name is Reinaldo Negron, and I am head of UTM for Wing. A little bit about Wing. Wing is connecting communities to the things they need through aviation. We have customers who achieve and get to enjoy orders that take 10 minutes or less, with flight times being 4 minutes or less. We do a lot with local merchants and enabling them to connect with 4 times as many customers as they normally connect with. And even in cities, kind of the work that we're doing and engaging with those communities, our trips are safer than road trips and can reduce traffic time and cut emissions by 99%. We do recognize that delivery is just one example of the many diverse systems and operations of today. And while you can probably spot the Wing drone here, there's many other delivery company drones, other types of activities such as inspection and other kind of industrial services. There's even a drone on the right that looks like a bird. And yes, that is a drone, and that's intended to go ahead and actually scare birds away from airports, just another kind of way that drones are included today. So there really isn't a single way a drone flies, a single solution to a problem. And we want to both enable and embrace kind of the diversity of solutions that are out there today across the broad range of services that drones can provide. And in order to support that diversity, we recognize that today the traditional aviation system is not intended for that, and these kind of untraditional and diverse aircraft. And while we can leverage a lot from the aviation learnings and principles and foundational approach, we do acknowledge that the system of the future should be different, must be different, and should respect and embrace and enable that diversity in order to best serve kind of the operators and the communities and the world around us. One example we like to look at is about a year ago in Australia, there was a single government app of Can I Fly There? Probably everyone in the room has used it, and probably everyone in the room has had some comments on it as well. But it was something that was put out by the safety regulator to help inform drone flyers of where they can and can't fly and of applicable rules and kind of airspace restrictions. With some of the feedback from the folks in the room here and elsewhere, and wanting to improve safety, CASA wanted a better app for drone operators. And industry was very focused and wanted to deliver on choice and flexibility. We know that whether you're detecting sharks by drone or using it for agriculture or supporting aerial imagery, all those use cases are different, and making sure that you have the right tool and integration of safety functions into the work you're doing is really critical, and that operators really should have choice in making sure they're getting the app that best meets their needs. And with that work, today the UTM ecosystem in Australia looks something like this. There are currently 4 apps out in the ecosystem. We have AirMap, Aeros, OK to Fly, OpenSky, but we're hoping to see more and more over time. CASA now has the capabilities to not just verify apps and a set of performance rules that those apps are to be verified against, but also the ability to publish a bit more dynamic advisories. For example, letting folks know that the AFL Grand Final is happening, and therefore it is likely unsafe and not following the rules for someone to go fly a drone in the area, given the density of people. And so they have that more kind of dynamic way of engaging and informing the community. That set of apps also leverage data from air services. So all the airspace data that you see in the applications does come from air services and plays a critical role in what's being provided. And we also, in that app ecosystem, have kind of the state government's regional fire data to make sure we have critical feeds for drone operators who are operating in that area and want to make sure that they stay clear of the fire activities that are going on. So we're excited to see kind of the group of 4 apps that exist today, but are wondering what are the next set of apps that are coming in the future. We've seen in other parts, and we'll talk about that a bit later, but in the US, we've seen 21 apps kind of enter this market, and we're excited to see that breadth of ecosystem occurring, and that those can all support different types of drone flyers, their missions, and make sure that they're providing kind of the best set of services to the drone flyers, both recreational and commercial, that they're supporting. This ecosystem approach, one, enables the operator choice that we talked about above, and it also simplifies and kind of integrates the access to airspace. And let's walk through kind of this diagram a bit here of kind of how that process happens. So the UAS operators on the right can kind of have their choice of UAS service suppliers. And those service suppliers help support the UAS operators in their function and in their operations by providing them safety via automation. That automation could be a helpful map of where you can and can't fly, but we expect that automation to continue to grow as more advanced services are made available, including things like strategically deconflicting traffic. One of the ways we enable this multiple provider model and this ecosystem approach is that we have safety via interoperability. And so via standard and open interfaces, these UAS service suppliers can communicate and share data with each other as needed, again, in support of the UAS operators' activities. And a key piece on here on the left is the authorities, right? The policymakers, the regulators. And when you're flying close to airports, air traffic control, and they help provide safety via oversight. So similar to the way that CASA established performance rules for the first set of app onboarding, we'd expect to see performance rules for many of the functions that UAS service suppliers will provide. They will then have to go prove they meet those rules and also make sure that they meet the required data exchange with authorities when that data is needed and can provide that there. And then the expectation is that the authorities would validate and approve based on the services that are being provided. And so you have that clear set of safety oversight. Finally, of course, and we talked about this on the previous slide, these performance rules will also identify the authoritative data that's required so that you know that as a UAS operator, that the verified apps that you're using are using the correct data sources and are meeting kind of, again, those performance rules defined by the authorities. This process also ensures that operators have access to tailored and cost-effective services. So one, we really work very hard to reduce the burden on authorities and have them require minimal infrastructure investment where, again, they don't have to build systems, but they can provide oversight of the systems and still make sure that it meets their requirements and performance rules. The UAS service suppliers, which is provided by industry, are investing, right? They assume the financial investment to support this growing drone ecosystem. We already see that there's 4 in Australia, and we see a broad demand globally for that investment. But those UAS service suppliers will kind of be tailored to different operators' needs and can also support more advanced operations. And so if you're flying a drone for a certain kind of mission, there might actually be a UAS service supplier that's more tailored or more built for the work that you're doing. And all of this is intended for UAS operators to have access to these kind of tailored specific tools that meet their needs. And in this environment, we have seen these things be free or very, very low cost and want to make sure that that continues through. And also, it makes it easier to perform advanced operations with the automation that these tools are providing. And also, similarly, if you have recognized services provided by industry but recognized by authorities, it makes things like the SORA approval process easier because they can know that you're using these recognized services to go ahead and meet your safety case as an operator, hopefully, again, simplifying and expediting that SORA process. And we're really excited to see all of this work support the RPAS industry advancement as a whole. We think diversity and correlated with it innovation is really critical. Australia is one of the leading spots in the world for RPAS. And we're seeing many, many more options continue to come to Australia, not just kind of lower altitude drones, but we're seeing air taxis and upper altitude. And we think that it's critical to make sure that that diversity and innovation can be well supported. We talked about cost a bit earlier, but keeping things lower, in some cases free, and low cost is really critical to make sure that operators and people who are performing drone services can go ahead and use them effectively, and also to make sure that there's no additional costs or burdens for investment by industry in this area as well. Harmonization, making sure the rules and regulations that are occur both nationally and globally are well harmonized. There are many folks who come to Australia to fly. We've actually seen this feedback in our OpenSky app of people who come from other countries, and we want to make sure that they have kind of a pretty seamless and well understood experience when they're flying in Australia so they can be as safe as they can be. And we also want to make sure that investments that are made in Australia can go ahead and also be leveraged internationally through harmonized global standards and regulations as well. And then finally, another key thing is things are rapidly changing, and we need to make sure that we have an environment that scales quickly and reacts quickly to the way that drones or even the world around us is changing. And so industry has invested in building a system that will scale quickly and can react, and we're seeing react kind of to the world of today. And we want to make sure that that process continues. But we also want to avoid kind of a single procurement process, or what we sometimes call a single point of progress. Australia has been a leader in RPAS and drones because they have allowed many different operators to do things in many different ways. We want to make sure that industry can support and be part of that, so everyone has a chance to kind of move progress forward. As we mentioned, we've looked at some of the other ecosystems that kind of relate to the things that we've talked about. So one ecosystem is Lance. Lance is a US capability to automatically access controlled airspace. It was started, I think, 3 or so years ago. And it is mainly led with industry-built functionality with about 21 Lance providers and integrated with different kinds of drone operators. It's approved over 150,000 flights across 500 plus airports. And it's been about $0 for access in seconds to that controlled airspace. And we've definitely seen how that level of access has enabled the industry to take off even more, and has enabled drone operators to provide even more valuable services and to do it in a more timely and effective way in areas where it's needed, which is sometimes closer to airports. So that's one example of the ecosystem in practice that we've seen some really, really good results in. Another piece that came up just recently, but in that kind of single provider model, we saw something just in the last couple of weeks where the UKNet's Airspace user portal was paused and was unable to be sustained due to some of the funding challenges with COVID. And this is kind of an example of a single point of reliance not really being resilient in challenging times like this, and also kind of a spot where we want to, while there was progress made when the portal came out, we want to make sure we continue progress. And by having multiple providers, you would be able to address that and continue to have services being provided as part of it. As we talked about before, having multiple providers does require standards. And so from that perspective, ASTM International has been a spot where a ton of this standards work has happened, and we've had involvement from across Australia, as well as over 130 member companies and government entities. ASTM International is working on UTM standards, including remote identification and deconfliction. As part of that work, we've been doing that standards development for quite a while, and the remote ID standard was published earlier this year. As you see at the top, in 2019, that was a demonstration and kind of validation of the ASTM remote ID standard. That shows that you have 3 different apps you can provide to the general public or law enforcement a view of just the drones around them and the area they're interested in. And regardless of the app that you pull up, and regardless of the number of providers that are servicing operators, you can still see a single holistic picture. And so that, again, enables a common view of everything in the air around you, even in that multiple provider model. And then we're continuing to work on more common and interoperable standards. And in 2020, we'll see validation of the initial draft of the strategic deconfliction standard happening in the FAA's UTM pilot program 2 that we're expected to see towards the second half of this year. So again, a continuing amount of validation and standards out there to make sure that multiple providers can work for that entire ecosystem. So what we would like to see happen next, we would welcome kind of continuing the private-public partnership that has made Australia successful to date, both with kind of the SORA and the flexibility of those approvals, but also the fact that we now can see industry investing and continuing to invest and providing services, and also having that leave room for the government not necessarily needing to do that. We see that continuation of industry-led solutions is pretty critical, and we're excited to see more providers in that industry space, and for them to be able to continue to kind of tailor it to the operators that they're supporting, but also keep them low cost or free for operators. So those are 2 things we'd like to see continue to happen. And in addition, we'd like to see continued investment in global harmonization and aligning to global standards. For companies investing in Australia, it's really critical to have standards that are consistent and can support, and people can bring technologies and solutions very quickly to Australia. But it's also very important for it to be the other way. We'd want to see Australian companies and solutions developed in Australia to be able to be exported quickly to kind of a global market, and want to make sure that if that harmonization is there, that opportunity can occur. We do think the ASTM International Standards is a key way of doing that. and enables that to kind of show alignment between Australia, the US, and kind of other entities in Europe to go ahead and have that broadest market, but also, again, a value of safety for having similar technologies and processes for operators around the world. So that was quite a bit to talk about, and definitely missed the opportunity to have this be a discussion back and forth. And so we're very excited for us to continue that discussion in the RPAS virtual event page. We will have a discussion forum called Promoting an Open Sky, and happy to have your questions and feedback and chat with you more there. So thank you again for taking time for us to have this discussion presentation together, and look forward to continuing it as we go forward. Thanks again, and have a great day.